afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me this afternoon. As you will probably know from the posted advert, we are collaborating with Joe McNally and the wonderful Annie K. Hawk. I'm so happy to be doing this stream today. Joe has very kindly pre-recorded some answers for me. So just before I forget, if you're not a subscriber, please do subscribe to the channel and press the little bell icon so that you are notified when we go live or when we upload a video. You've probably seen we're going to talk about Flash today. I personally kind of segment Flash into two different categories. One is kind of fill Flash to help a picture along, if you like, to just provide a little bit of illumination where you would otherwise have very dark shadows. And the other is kind of creative Flash, where you use Flash to really make the picture. Joe McNally, as a lot of you will know, is a Nikon ambassador. He is an absolute genius when it comes to just photography in general, but also to Flash work. And I want to share some of his work with you and also his words of wisdom. So I posted a few questions to him, which he has gone through systematically. I have some examples to show you as well. But the first thing I'm going to do is play his little introduction. So,
hi, Joe McNally here in Connecticut in the United States, at home as most of the world is. I hope everyone out there is staying safe and well. I'm working with Grays of Westminster, happily so. Becky sent a series of questions about Flash, and I'm happy to engage and try to answer them as best as I can. I love Grays. It's a classy, erudite, camera-savvy store. It's a wonderful place to go. And plus, how can you not fall in love with a store that A, deals only in Nikon cameras, and B, is owned by Gray Levitt, who was a tremendous fan of The Scarecrow of Romney Marsh, which was one of my favorite fables when I was a kid.
So that is Joe. As many of you know him already, he is a friend of the shop. He is a wonderful Nikon ambassador, and he does spectacular work with Flash, which I'm now going to show you.
The first question Becky has sent me is, and I'm going to read it right over here, there are so many modes on my flashes, I don't know what to do with them. What would you suggest for a beginner? Yes, Flash. Oh, it's like the final frontier. It's like going north of the wall, right? Flash. Oh my goodness. It's scary even to some seasoned pros. We all love to go shoot. Take the camera, fancy, sorts lots of problems out, put it on automatic modes like an aperture priority or even a program. You can see the results right in the LCD. You're dealing with light you can see, and the results are right here. It's pure fun, right? But then take a flash in hand, which flashes, we can't see it, how do we control it? Terror sets in, right? And we oftentimes just have a few bad experiences with a flash right out of the gate, and then we quietly put it back in the bag and never use it again. And therefore, you declare yourself to be an available light photographer, and that's great until there isn't any light available. So, let's get into it, okay? The basic mode of operation that I would recommend very highly if you're just getting out of the gate is TTL. That's a good set of letters to familiarize yourself with. TTL, through the lens, okay? Lots of things affect flash exposure. Nowadays, in these modern systems where you are using TTL mode, it means that the flash is correlating to what the camera sees through the lens. So, with a 28mm lens, the flash will have a certain value. With a 200mm lens, the flash will react differently. Hence, it can be a little frustrating because of that variance. It's kind of the beauty of the system and also the frustration of the system, at least occasionally. Distance also affects the power of flash, for sure. Okay? So, to avoid kind of getting disappointed right away with flash, I would highly recommend going to TTL through the lens. Highly automated. It works really well. Very sensitive. You can adjust the power within the context of TTL, but at first, I would dial in TTL, put the flash on the hot shoe of the camera, program mode, aperture priority, or manual, all works well with TTL flash, and go out and start to experiment. I can't say that often enough. In the world of flash photography, if you really want to get familiar with it, experiment, experiment, experiment. Now, some folks, your first experience with a flash will be the little onboard built-in flashes. I don't have a camera that has a built-in flash, but they are located right up in here. There's a flash button. You can pop them up. In certain modes, they'll pop up automatically, right? And It can be a little daunting, that little pop-up. Handy to be sure, but oftentimes harsh, over bright, and you wonder how you can control it. Here's the thing, you can always control, within the context of the camera, the power of the flash. That little flash button that's oftentimes located right over here, you press that down, you spin your command dial, and you'll see that you can vary the power of the flash. Always remember, just like you can bracket your f-stops and change, the exposure of an available light scene, you can do the same thing with flash. You don't have to be the victim of circumstances. You don't have to be subservient to the flash by just letting it do what it's going to do. You can step into the controls and very easily, just with a couple of touches, control the power of that flash. I highly recommend the idea of flash being somewhat subdued. Underplay the flash instead of overplay it. Your results will be more pleasing.
So what Joe was saying, I'm just going to recap a little bit. If you've got one of these cameras here, like a small one with an onboard flash, then as he pointed out, you pop up that little button there and you've got this thing. Now, the problem with this flash is that it's very directional. You can only point it in one direction, and sometimes that gives you a less than pleasing look. But you can, as he said, dial it up or down. So the way to do that is when you push this button, you might see there on the screen, it's very hard to see because of the glare, but just above that flash button is a symbol with the flash icon and then a plus and a minus, which is your exposure compensation symbol normally, but in this case is flash compensation. So when you push and hold that button and you twiddle your back dial, as Joe said, it will allow you to underexpose or slightly overexpose the flash. You can only push the power up on the flash by one stop, and usually it's in thirds of a stop, for those of you that know what that means. If you want to bring down the flash, you can bring it down by up to 3 stops, which means that you can make it very, very subdued so that it's just giving you the tiniest amount of flash. So that's on the built-in flash. Now, when it comes to speed lights, now I'm going to show, this is my trusty SB600. I have had this for I don't know how long. The SB600 was both an on hot shoe flash and also is a slave, which means that other flashes can control it and make it fire. That's very useful if you've got a camera that has a built-in flash, because you can use it, in some cases, not all, you can use it to fire this off camera. We'll talk about that a little bit later. The next one up from this was the SB800, and now we've got the SB900s and the 700s, and then the more recent ones, the SB5000, which Joe will talk about in a little bit. With a little flash like this, you can either, if you've got it on the hot shoe, you can change your flash compensation either through the camera, or you can actually do it on the back of the flash itself. Then I can use flash compensation on the flash, or as I say, through the camera. It's much easier to do it through the camera because you've got it all at your fingertips there, but you can just dial it down a little bit or dial it up if you need to. But as Joe said, it's quite good to use it as a tool, which will be fairly subdued. I'm going to show you some examples in answer to his questions. Joe's actually drawn his kind of setup with his camera and his SB5000 doing straight directional flash on the subject. So directional flash for a beginner, just to show you, looks like that. So you've got the flash head on with the subject. There's no illumination behind the subject, which you can tell also because there's a shadow here. So if you look at that setup, he's given us a bird's eye view as well, and written the settings here. I will make these slides available for you afterwards. So the SB5000 is on the top of the camera, shooting straight at the subject, and and he's going, is he using straight flash? Oh my, indeed. So the subject is right there, and it's getting that full-on flash look like that. All right, so the next option, which we are going to talk about in a little bit, is how to bounce your flash. And it looks like that. When you bounce the flash behind you, and Joe is going to also explain that in your video, you don't get that sort of straight on glare look. You also can then manipulate the background a little bit more because you don't have as much light going straight onto the background. And that looks something like this. So here is Joe, and here is the flash, and it points to the back wall, and the subject is nice. And also the subject then doesn't kind of get a glare in the face. That is the next question. That leads me to the next question, which someone asked, which was that they want to use fill flash for photography so that it doesn't have that hair in the headlamps look, and what's the best way to achieve this. So he's going to talk about in his next video the different options on this, and I will also go through those slides for this, so you get this nice bounce effect instead of the straight on effect, which we often get with a little bit of shine and things like that on our models or our subjects that we're taking pictures of. When you bounce the light, you end up with this much kind of softer look. So that's the next question. I'm going to cue that up for you now.
Reading right over here. I want to use fill flash for my photography so that it doesn't have that hair in the headlamps look. What's the best way to achieve that? I know exactly what you're talking about. That flash slamming into the human face, making everybody look like they just got caught doing something that they should be arrested for. You know, not good, right? Generally speaking, what we are hired to do as photographers is take a flattering approach to the human face. Make someone look good. Straight, hard flash is going to make someone look bad. So let's talk a little bit about it. The big three of light: quality, color, direction. To avoid this hair in the headlamps deal, I'm going to speak to you now principally about direction. When you have the flash on the hot shoe of the camera, you know, like this, boom, okay? That is what we're talking about in terms of the hair in the headlamps. Some folks say deer in the headlights, whatever, okay? It's the idea of someone almost being trapped by the light, pinned by the light and the force of it, contrasty, bright, harsh. So, one of the ways you can avoid this is to take the flash off the hot shoe and directionalize it in a more pleasing way to create, say, for instance, a highlight side and a shadow side. That will automatically take and give the face a more of a richness, more character, more volume, and dimension. Remember, shadows are your friend. A little bit of a shadow on the human face imparts to it a certain level of dimension. Especially if you have a face that has tremendous character, you want shadows in there because you want to really, really see a life well lived in the face of the subject that you're approaching. One of the ways you can do that is with an appropriate address of light. And one of the best ways to do that is to take the flash off the camera. Another way to do that, and to embrace the face in a more flattering way, is to enlarge the source of light. If you notice, this, okay, the source of light is really quite small, okay? Small light, hard shadows. It goes together hand in glove. Think of the sun on a bright sunny day, right? Harsh, harsh shadows on the ground. Drop a set of clouds between us and the sun. It's like a big giant diffuser or umbrella. The shadows virtually disappear. The light wraps instead of slamming into things. That is an important thing to remember as well. If you have a white wall that you can take your flash and bounce it off of, that's a real gift. You can photograph 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people with a single flash on the camera if you find an appropriately sized white wall behind you. The way you can do this is very easy. Turn the flash around. Now, if you've been following along, I mentioned TTL, okay? TTL is very important. TTL works both ways. It works when the flash is looking right at the subject. It works when the flash is pointed away from the subject, okay? By taking this light here and bouncing it backwards off a white wall, what do? I enlarge the volume of the light tremendously. Here's my simulated wall, right? Right behind the flash. If I were to photograph impromptu just this way, holding up this white piece of paper, it would be a better photograph than if I just looked at my subject and did that, okay? So remember this: quality, color, direction, all very important. Direction has a direct impact, if you will, on the nature of the way the light embraces the face. Straight flash, going to be tough for your subject. Take the flash off the camera, directionalize it, enlarge it, bounce it. All those things will help you in the way you approach portraiture.
All right, so that explains actually this picture and the next set of pictures that I'm going to show you. So as Joe was saying, when you are shooting off camera or bouncing the flash, this last shot, actually, I was just reading his notes. It's always a good thing to do. This is flash off camera. As he says, very nice effect. Now the light is coming from camera right, so the light's coming from over here. And there is a highlight side to the face and a shadow side. The light is bouncing into an umbrella, producing a soft and forgiving light, flattering to the subject. So using the flash off camera is probably one of the most frequently asked questions that we get. I have my friend and colleague has actually WhatsApped me a couple of your questions, so I will address those in just a moment. So just to show you those differences again, here is head-on flash. Here is bounce flash with that lovely little diagram here where the flash is actually bouncing against the white wall. And then here is your off-camera flash. Now, Ariana asked, why do photographers use flash and not static light? Now, that's a very good question. Yes, originally it was for portability. So in the, I would say, old days, those big studio lights were not only big, but they also got incredibly hot, and you couldn't really transport them around. The speed lights and those kind of on-camera flash guns were designed mainly for photographers to use so that they could travel around and they could actually, carry their flashes in their normal camera bag without too much of a problem. These days, we see more and more LED studio lights. And for example, Bowens makes some wonderful studio lights. There is Profoto, who a lot of you will probably have heard of. Very expensive, very, very good constant light sources. And they also have flash modes. We also work with Rotolight quite a lot. They do massive LED panels, very, very high quality LED panels. And you can spend quite a lot on these, but if you are doing it for a living, then it makes sense. Speed lights also tend to be a bit cheaper, so they're more obtainable. And contrary to what a lot of people believe, they're not just for amateurs. They are used by professionals consistently, but they are much more portable. I'm going to talk about using these cameras off flash. There are a couple of systems that some of you will know already. So the SB5000 and the D500, D850, let's just grab my D850 here. So D500, D5, D850 and the D780 don't have a built-in flash, neither do the Z cameras. What they do have is an ability to control the SB5000s specifically with radio trigger. You do need a little dongle for that called the WR-R10, which sadly is out of stock with Nikon. But that failing, there's a couple of other options. For a long time, Nikon have had what's called the Creative Lighting System, or CLS for short. So if you see on literature where it says, compatible with Nikon CLS, it's the Creative Lighting System. That's essentially an infrared system. It's not radio triggered. Pocket Wizard, if you've heard of them, they're radio triggers. They're very good, and they came about before Nikon kind of cottoned on to the fact that people wanted radio triggers. So some of you may already have Pocket Wizards. They work with multiple flash systems. They work with multiple cameras. They're very, very good. The kind of built-in radio trigger system is fantastic, but it's limited in that it only works currently with the SB5000. So if you have an older flash, or if you're trying to use multiple different flashes, so sometimes I use, say, an SB700 and an SB600, or an SB5000 and an SB700. So how do you get those to talk to each other? It's the Creative Lighting System. The Creative Lighting System, if you've got a built-in flash on your camera, it will allow you to send out an infrared signal using the built-in flash to a remote flash so that it will fire the flash remotely. And I'll tell you what setting that is in a minute with a camera that has a built-in flash, not this one. Or if you've got a flash that works as a commander, so not an SB600, but an 800, 900, 910, SB700, or a 5000, all of those are commander units. You can use that on the camera, and then you can fire your slave flashes using the main flash on the camera. So this becomes what they call the slave, and the flash that goes on the camera is called the commander, and it will fire out an infrared signal at the same time as flashing, so you do get lots of light, and it will fire your remote flash. Another way to get around that, if you don't have a built-in flash and you don't want to put your flash on the camera, is actually if you use a thing called an SU800, which is Nikon's infrared commander unit, and it just does that and nothing else. It commands a whole host of flashes, and it quite literally has that one job. If you've ever looked at or bought or owned the Nikon close-up commander kit, which is called the SB-R1C1, doesn't roll off the tongue, but never mind. It's a close-up kit. You mount the flashes to the front of your lens, and you've got the little commander on the top of your camera, or you can buy it without the commander and actually just use the built-in flash to trigger those little wireless remote flashes. So that's all Creative Lighting System. Just to mention, because someone sent me an email about this the other day, there is an old school style of commanding flashes, and it's still available on some of these more recent flashes. It's called SU4 mode. What on earth does SU4 mode mean? Well, it refers to a tiny product called the SU4, which actually would send out, it's kind of like a primitive version of the Creative Lighting System. It basically tells the flash to fire as soon as it sees another flash. This is not very practical if you're in a room full of photographers all flashing away. But if you are stuck with, not wanting to have your camera, not wanting to have your flash on the camera, and you want your SB5000 off the camera, but you do also want to fire another flash, which doesn't work with the Creative Lighting System, or some other reason why you might want to do it, you can use SU4 mode, which basically means that the flash that's on SU4 mode as a slave will fire regardless of what flash it sees. If you've got a little D3000, 100, 200, 300, any of those, they don't have the command mode built into the flash. So in order to get a flash to remote fire, you would need to use the SU4 mode. Gordon Powell is asking, what about the Z6? You will need an SU800, or you need the WRR10. The WRR10 is that little radio trigger thing that sticks into the side of your Z camera, and it actually fires the SB5000. If you don't have an SB5000, then that's very irrelevant because it only works with the SB5000. If you've got any other flash gun, then you will need to find an alternative solution. You can, if you don't need a huge amount of distance and you've got a flash that has a hot shoe and it doesn't have a sync socket in the side, you can just get a hot shoe to hot shoe cable if your working distance is short enough. Some of the Nikon hot shoe to hot shoe cable to use this off camera is only about 80 centimeters long, which is not enough for most people to work with, but there are third-party ones out there that are much longer. So if you are happy to work with cables, then that is the cheapest way to do it, just as a tip for you. All right, I am going to show you some examples from the lovely Joe. He says, fill flash can be very effective. Here, the subject stands in open shade, and what the flash is doing is filling the face, giving it character. And if I just flip up to this one, you can see this is the behind the scenes shot. So basically, the fill flash, Joe's not got a flash on his camera. He's got a flash over the side here, and it's just providing a little bit of illumination, as you can see from that gorgeous portrait there, on the side of the face, which without it would probably look quite harsh in terms of shadows. All right, for some reason these open slightly out of sequence, so I'm gonna go up to this one now. This is also a beautiful example. This is fill flash in an urban environment. Street lights are intermittent and off color, so the flash will light the subject's skin tone properly. If you ever shoot out and about in the street, on location, that sort of thing, you will probably have found that any of the available light around you is usually off color. So the fill flash in this situation is actually just providing that correct skin tone. This is what Joe would call character-driven light, and I can completely understand why. So here, the light is camera left at a steep angle to the subject, producing charismatic shadows. Now, how phenomenal is that shadow there? I mean, that just kind of brings a whole extra dimension to the picture, which without it could have made the picture look not as impressive as it did. And then this one, here we go. This is another amazing portrait. All the light is behind the subject. Here, pushing light at the subject's face lights them and gives you exposure control over the background, lighting for drama. So if you've ever experienced shooting a portrait or anything at all against a bright background like a sky or a sunset or anything like that, you'll know full well that you end up with a person in pretty much full silhouette. So what Joe's done here to handle that is that he's pushed the light around to the subject's face. You can do this by using flash. You could also do this if you had enough light by using just a reflector, as I talked about in my stream. Gosh, must have been about 2 weeks ago now, we were talking about reflectors. But it just by providing, I mean, this, you can see from the catch light, there is some light source coming in from this direction. But just providing that extra light with everything that's going on in the background here stops this lady's face from being completely in silhouette. So that's a really good handling for that. So that's fill flash, and that's how that works. Now, the next one I don't have any sample images for, but I am going to show you Joe's next video. So the question I asked, and he will repeat it, but I'm going to say it again just for repetition. What is the difference between TTL and TTL-BL? Well, this is a question I get asked an awful lot, so I thought Joe could explain it probably better than I did. So here we go.
Next question. Let's see. What is the difference between TTL and TTL-BL? Good question. This stuff can get confusing. Lots of acronyms and all that sort of jazz. TTL, we've already discussed. Through the lens. The flash will react and expose in accordance with what the camera is seeing. Between wide lens, long lens, the camera sees different parts of the world with different exposure values, and the flash strives to accommodate those exposure values in TTL mode. Now, TTL-BL means TTL balanced light. Okay, you can see here, I can't show you my LCD because there's too many reflections, but you can see here, okay, there's a difference between iTTL and iTTL-BL. The I is a term, it's called intelligent TTL, okay, and it is pretty darn smart, okay, for sure. But there's a significant difference here, TTL, TTL-BL. Let's talk about it. The camera, when you have a subject in front of you, has lots of ways of ascertaining whether that in fact is your main subject. The lens is chipping in distance information via the CPU. There is face recognition going on, lots of algorithms and computer stuff going on in the camera that is contributing to the sensibility the camera has that, yes, this person here is my main subject. When you're in TTL mode on the flash, that's what the flash addresses, okay? It is looking to expose properly your main subject, okay? It does not necessarily care so much about the rest of the scene. It is vectored in on the significance of that main subject. When you flip over into TTL-BL, balanced light, it means now that the flash is trying to address the entire scene. I say kind of like it's trying to smooth out the exposure throughout the scene. That's not really a technical term, okay? But you get the idea. At that point, balanced light, think of it this way. It's trying to balance the light through foreground, middle ground, and background. It does not specifically address the subject at hand, which might, that person or that thing might be very close to the camera. But in BL mode, TTL-BL, the camera is looking at that subject, but also beyond that subject and ascertaining the values of this entire scene and trying to accommodate an exposure that makes the scene even exposure-wise front to back. Okay, in TTL, if you flip back over to that, the TTL mode will disregard some of the aspects of the environment and really concentrate on exposing your main subject properly. It's easy to switch between the two. There's a little dial in the back of the SB5000. Click it over, you go TTL-BL, TTL-BL. Very easy. Simple touch tone adjustments are available to you in the SB910, SB900, SB800, okay? It's a very valuable distinction to realize because, for instance, if you're in, say, a very dark environment, say backstage or something like that, where there's might be a singular kind of spotlight effect on your main subject or very narrow beams of light and the rest of the scene goes black, would you be in BL mode at that point? No, because the camera will try to strive to expose that darkness, which is an impossibility. That's a situation where you'll go to TTL, and your main subject is what the flash is going to deal with, okay? In a more evenly lit situation, if you just want kind of a nice exposure with your subject and then out into the, the rear aspects of the photograph, back of the room or something down the way, down the driveway or something like that, you want the camera to deal with the whole scene, TTL-BL is a more valuable tool, potentially. So it's an important distinction, lots of letters, But experiment, 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 and you'll get used to it. Next question. All right. What is high-speed sync and how do I use it? Okay. Again, these are excellent questions and things that even as a beginner you should know about and be able to experiment with, because this is the way you'll grow in terms of your own particular proficiency at the camera, but also your pictures will get better and better as you access more of the technology that's available to you. So high-speed sync. Let's talk about shutter speed here for a second. Shutter speed is basically the shutter opening and closing. The faster the shutter moves, the less light hits the sensor of the camera. Logical, right? The longer that shutter is open, light just keeps pouring in. Simple. Now, when you mix a flash into that scenario, the flash is light as well, and it has to synchronize with the opening and closing of your shutter. Historically, back in the bad old days, the upper level of synchronization with a flash and a camera shutter was a 60th of a second. Not particularly advantageous at all. We've since gone on to the wonderful aspects of higher speed synchronization, and most cameras now, their native sync speed, where they will work quite well with a flash, is 1/250th of a second, generally speaking, for most models. Okay, now, 1/250th of a second syncing with the flash sounds great, but oftentimes we are in light situations that will go well beyond a 250th of a second, and you want to be able to synchronize your flash even though you're shooting faster and faster and faster to accommodate changing light conditions. Never used to be possible. Now it is through the function known as high-speed sync. In the Nikon system, you can make sure that your camera is in high-speed sync by going to the custom control bank E. Okay, that is flash and bracketing. E1 is the checkoff. You go in there, a little asterisk will come up when you check off high-speed sync. Leave it there. Doesn't affect your normal flash operation, and it's a handy thing to have your camera already set up and ready to go should you suddenly segue into a situation where you need a faster shutter speed and you are using flash. So what happens in high-speed sync is that the flash fires from the flash, wherever you have it. This can easily be applied in remote flash situations as well as when you have the flash on the camera. No problems with either mode. Okay, flash can be over here, backlit, down the block, on the camera. High-speed sync works. And every shutter speed that you go north of 250, faster than 250, okay, we can do the scale 500, 1,000, 2,000, 4,000, etc. The flash will now accommodate and synchronize with those fast shutter speeds. The give back, or the price you pay for all that wonderful shutter speed synchronization, is that the flash consistently loses power as you go up the scale of shutter speeds. Experience, this is not mathematical, but every shutter speed you go up, say you go from 2,000 to 4,000, one stop, increasing the speed of the shutter, you generally speaking lose about 50% of the power of the flash. So that's the give back. As you go faster and faster, the flash gets weaker and weaker. Hence, you have to accommodate that in terms of exposing your scene. That could mean going to faster and faster, more open f-stops. From an f5.6 to a 4 to a 2.8 to a 2.0. Lots of very fast lenses out there now. What does that speed of f-stop, or the wide open f-stop, if you will, give you? It gives you a very out of focus background. You'll see a lot of dramatic portraiture now done outdoors in the streets, and the background is completely blurry and sort of just mystical and gauzy and wonderful looking. And that means that that particular scene has been rendered with a very wide open f-stop. You combine that with a flash up front, you've got a world of possibilities, because you can expose your subject well with the flash, and then via high-speed sync, you can control your background. Always remember this, okay? Your shutter speeds tend to control your scene. Your f-stop correlates to the power of your flash. There's an overlap there, but principally speaking, you want to talk about f-stops relating to the power of your flash, whereas you use your shutter speed to look out into the world and control the density or exposure of that scene. So now you have three wheels of control, if you will. f-stops, shutter speeds, and the application of flash. If you practice and use all three in concert and do them well, you'll start to render some absolutely beautifully lit portraits that you have not only control of the light on your subject, you'll have control of how your background reads in the photograph. Do you want a lot of it sharp, or do you want a lot of it out of focus? All these things become possible as you continue to access the wonderful technology available to you in the cameras.
All right, so now I want to talk you through the stills that go along with that segment of Joe's video. So he sent me some stills specifically on the subject of the difference between high-speed sync and not using it. So this is a shot which was taken at 60th of a second at f11 with a 50mm lens. And he describes it as a more normal shutter speed syncing with flash. The small aperture renders the background much sharper than the wide open aperture. Now, the shot of a wide open aperture is this one, so you can see very clearly the difference. This is at f1.4 at 3,200th of a second. So this is where high-speed sync would really come into its own. You've got a very, very fast shutter speed and a nice wide aperture. So just to show you that comparison again, that is with f11 with a 60th of a second. This is same kind of lighting in that it produces the same kind of colors and tones, but it's shot f1.4 at 3,200th of a second. Now let's move along to, so this is a set of images shot on the street, and these are the behind the scenes images. So you can see Joe here's got his SP5000 pointed backwards. He's actually also got a speed light in this massive kind of diffuser umbrella, if you like, here. And here's another one just behind the camera. So you can see there's the flash, there's the slave flash, and then here's a reflector beneath. And here's yet another great behind the scenes image. So you can see now this time he's got the flash pointed towards the subject, but because he's so far away, it's not going to make a big difference to the actual face of the model. So let's have a look here I'll talk you through these settings. So this one is shot at f11 at 80th of a second. This is with a 24mm lens. Now let's look at same kind of shot, except this is shot at f1.4 with 8,000th of a second. So that difference in shutter speed has allowed the flash, allowed Joe as a photographer to shoot at a much wider aperture and not get a kind of completely blown out effect, and also this very nice shallow depth of field. And then lastly, this one is with a 200mm at 4,000th of a second at f2.8. So that is another great example there. Now, these last two images are also a good comparison. Here we've got a 20mm lens at f16, 160th of a second, versus this one. Though this would be considered, 160th is actually not high speed sync because it's still within the normal bounds of speedlight capabilities. But just to show you the difference of how the depth of field is affected by the aperture and the shutter speed, this is also f16 at a 30th of a second. So it's kind of interesting, just the different effects there with the 20mm lens. So those are the images to go along with that segment of video. Thank you so much to everyone for your patience and your wonderful kindness in bearing with me and my rather shoddy internet connection today. Everyone, thank you so much for your contributions to the Coffee Fund. You guys are all amazing. Thank you for bearing with me. I really, really appreciate it. I'm so sorry that we had so many technical difficulties, but we are going to sort through it. I will see you next Tuesday. So we've got a bank holiday weekend coming, which means that you've got plenty of time to go out there. Do exactly as Joe says, do lots and lots of experimentation with your flashes if you've got them. And I will be covering a few different topics next week on the subject of close-up and portraiture and things like that.